This is crazy news. We have a new top open source image generator. It's called HiDream by Vivago, and don't take my word for it. If you look at this independent leaderboard by Artificial Analysis, which ranks all the text-to-image models, you can see that HiDream is currently the #1 open source model out there. Note that the next best open source model is all the way down here, Flux 1 Dev. Also note that Flux Pro is not open source. This is a closed source model. It's pretty insane how good this is. Yes, this even beats Flux, plus it's completely uncensored right out of the gate, so you can prompt it to generate some pretty wild things. Plus, the models are already out. So in this video, I'm going to test it on a series of really tricky prompts and compare this with the other top open source image models out there so you can see how good this is. Plus, I'll show you how to install this and run it locally for unlimited times on your computer. Now, before we go into where to use it and how to install this, let's first look at some demos. Here's what the interface looks like, and don't worry, in the latter half of the video, I'm going to show you step by step how to install this and run it locally on your computer. But for now, let's just go over some demos to show you what this can and cannot do. So here's the first prompt: a ballerina frozen mid-leap during a performance. Her left leg is extended forward, arms forming a soft arc above her head. Spotlight on her. Let's click run and see what that gives us. And note that I'm using the full model for all my generations. And here's what we get. Now I'm going to run this a few more times and take the best of 3 generations. Alright, so here's the best out of 3 generations. In terms of the hands and fingers, it looks like this one is the most accurate, so I'm going to go with this one. But note that for all 3 generations, it was able to get the anatomy of the woman very accurately. So this isn't like a nerfed model like Stable Diffusion 3, where it can't even generate humans properly because of its censorship. This is completely uncensored. And then here's the same prompt. Note that I'm comparing this with the other top open source models out there, Flux Dev, Stable Diffusion 3.5, and Stable Diffusion XL, which is still pretty good, to be honest. Notice that I did not compare this with Flux Pro because that is closed source. So here I'm only comparing HiDream with open source models so that it's an apples to apples comparison. Note that for the prompt, I did specify for the ballerina to be frozen mid-leap during a performance. So out of all these 4 images, HiDream was the only one that was able to generate her in mid-leap. Plus, anatomically, everything looks pretty accurate to me. Note that for all the other models, it couldn't really generate the fingers very accurately, including Flux and SD 3.5 and SDXL. Plus, notice for SDXL, the face is kind of messed up. So I would say out of these 4 generations, HiDream produced the best image here. Alright, next up, I tested this prompt. An isometric 3D scene of a bedroom. There is a man sitting on a red chair at a wooden desk, working on a laptop. There's a white empty bookshelf. A pet cat is curled up on a gray bed with white pillows. Beside the bed is a nightstand with a lamp and alarm clock. The wall is teal. There is a window with white curtains, there are some houseplants, and an acoustic guitar hanging on the wall. And this prompt is purposely very complicated with a lot of different objects in different colors and positions, and I'm really trying to see if the image model can understand and generate all of this at once. So let's look at HiDream's generation first. Here we do see a man sitting on a red chair, working at a wooden table on his laptop. There is a bookshelf, but it's not empty. There is a cat lying on a gray bed with white pillows. There is a nightstand with a lamp and alarm clock. Plus there is a guitar hanging on the wall. And there's a window with white curtains. So this looks pretty good to me. If you look at Flux Dev, there is a man sitting on a red chair. I'm not sure if the desk is wooden. The bookshelf is not empty. Plus the nightstand is missing an alarm clock. And note that this is the best out of 3 generations. For SDXL, the guitars look messed up. There is no alarm clock on this nightstand. Plus the bed is messed up. The cat is messed up. This just has a lot of errors. And then for SDXL, this isn't really an isometric 3D scene. Plus it's missing the bed. It's missing a guitar. There are just a lot of errors with this. So in terms of following the prompt, especially if it's really complicated with a lot of details, again, I would have to give the point to HiDream. It's really good at prompt adherence. Alright, next the prompt is a realistic school yearbook photo page with student photos. Each student has a unique outfit and expression. So here's HiDream's example. It even put school year at the top of the page, and the text is completely correct. We do have a nice looking grid of realistic looking yearbook photos. The only flaw I can spot is that there are some repeats of the same faces. So this kid and this kid and this one kind of look the same. Same with these two girls. But other than that, I mean, these do look like realistic yearbook photos. Now, if we look at Flux Dev, this does kind of look like a yearbook photo, although all these students do have kind of a plastic face, which is common among Flux generations. I would say these don't really look like yearbook photos, especially if you compare it with this generation by HiDream. However, I do like that this does look like a page in a yearbook, plus it even has some made-up text at the bottom of each photo for the names of the students. And then here's Stable Diffusion 3. It's just not great. I mean, the quality of these faces are really blurry, plus this grid isn't even aligned properly. Like, some photos are smaller, some photos are larger, plus some rows have names, some rows don't have names. It's just not a very consistent generation. And then SDXL, the quality of these portrait photos is actually not bad, especially if you zoom out. This does look quite realistic, but as soon as you zoom in, notice that there are a lot of deformations and weird things going on with the faces. Plus, this doesn't really look like a page in a yearbook. This looks more like a poster of a graduation class, I would say. So out of all these examples, although HiDream isn't great, there are repetitions of some of these faces, but overall, this does look like the best grid of yearbook photos. Let me know in the comments what you think. Since GTA 6 is never gonna happen, let's just create it with AI. So here the prompt is create the cover of the video game GTA 6 for PS5. The design should be for a standard PS5 video game case. So here is HiDream's example. It has a very beautiful and standard PS5 design here with the Grand Theft Auto logo. All the text looks correct. The only flaw I can really point out is that this age rating does not look correct, plus this logo over here. But the design overall does have that GTA vibe to it. And then if you look at Flux Dev, this also has a perfect PS5 logo, plus GTA 6, plus the text here looks correct. We have some strange watermark here for some reason. And then these two symbols and logos do not look correct. In terms of the design of the game, I would say it doesn't really have as much of a GT vibe to it as this one. And then for both SD 3.5 and SDXL, it just couldn't really generate a PS5 case, even though I've tested this prompt 3 times for each model. So again, out of the 4 generations, if I had to pick a winner, I would go with HiDream. But let me know in the comments what you think. Alright, here again, I'm testing it on a really tricky prompt with things that don't really go together in real life. So here the prompt is a tiger with butterfly wings playing chess against a translucent ghost. So here's HiDream's generation. This is the best of 3 generations. And there is a tiger with butterfly wings. This is a translucent ghost, plus they are playing chess. The only minor flaw I can spot is that the chessboard does not look accurate. I think there should be more squares on this grid, but at least it does have pieces in both colors. And then here is Flux Dev's generation. It chose to generate this in like 2.5D, which is okay. I didn't specify for this to be a realistic photo. So this is a tiger with butterfly wings. There is a cute ghost, and they are playing chess, but in terms of the accuracy and realism of this chessboard and the chess pieces, notice that HiDream's generation is more accurate. So here, we only have pieces of one color. And then for SD 3.5, it's just a total nightmare. It could not handle this prompt even after prompting it 3 times. And then for SDXL, it can generate a tiger without butterfly wings. Here we have a strange ghost with butterfly wings. And then the chess game is not accurate. It has pieces in 3 colors for some reason. So again, out of all these examples, if I had to pick a winner, I would go with HiDream. It's really good at handling these tricky prompts. Alright, here's another tricky prompt. A hand holding a pen, writing in a diary. On the page, there is handwritten text that says, "This is quite a long piece of text, much longer than what typical AI image models could generate accurately. This is a test to see if all the text will show up correctly here. Also, remember to subscribe to my channel." That's your cue to do so, by the way. So here's HiDream's generation. This does not look like handwritten text, but it did get most of the text correct. However, because this is a super long sentence, it did mess up in the middle here, but somehow it was able to get it correct again near the end. And then here's Flux Dev's generation, and this is the best out of 3 generations, so it could not get all of the text correct. In fact, this text doesn't even make sense. And then here is SD3's generation. I guess it got the first 2 words correct, and then it started messing up again. Plus, oh my god, look at the fingers here. It can't even hold a pen. That's because SD 3.5 is pretty nerfed in terms of understanding human anatomy. And then for SDXL, the hand holding the pen looks really good. This does look like handwritten text, but the text does not say what I specified for it to say. Even though HiDream's generation is not perfect in terms of actually generating long snippets of text, you can see that it's currently the best open source model for this. Alright, next I wanted to see if it can generate some lower quality amateur photos. So here the prompt is a teenage woman holding a handwritten note that says verify me 4/9/2025. Low quality selfie photo, poor lighting, amateur. So here's HiDream's generation. The text is accurate. However, this looks way too polished. Look at the shallow depth of field. There's too much blur in the background. This looks like a professional photo. Flux Dev looks a bit better. You can see the background is less blurry. The text looks correct. So this looks more like an amateur low quality selfie photo. And then for SD 3.5, this looks even better. So this is kind of the grainy low quality photo that I was going for. However, notice that the slash here is messed up and oh my god. Look at this hand. Look at these fingers. Again, SD 3.5 is just not good with anatomy. And then we have SDXL. Surprisingly, this is the style that I was going for. So in terms of style, SDXL actually looks the best. However, the text is not correct, plus her hand is messed up. So it's hard to pick a winner here. In terms of the least amount of errors and actually looking like an amateur photo, I would have to go with Flux Dev in this case. Alright, next the prompt is a modern UI for a consulting firm website. So here is HiDream's generation. It got some of the text correct. So for example, consulting firm up here, and then contact, and then your business. And this does look like a very minimalist, modern website for a consulting firm. Here is Flux Dev's generation. This is also not bad. This does look like a professional website, although from the photos, this looks more like a psychologist or psychiatrist session more than a consultant. Let me know in the comments if you think the same thing. And then here is SD 3.5. This is the best out of 3 generations, and you can see it's not great. And then here's SDXL. It's not too bad, but the text is messed up, the people are messed up. This is only good for like really rough prototyping. So out of all 4 examples, if I were to pick the one that looks like a web page for a consulting firm, I don't know. I would have to go with HiDream. Let me know in the comments what you think. Alright, next I wanted to see if it can generate actual existing people. So the prompt is Will Smith, Iron Man, and Queen Elizabeth having dinner together. So here is HiDream's example. Will Smith doesn't really look like Will Smith, but Iron Man looks perfect, plus so does Queen Elizabeth. Everything looks super detailed. It's hard to find any flaws with this. For Flux Dev, the crazy thing is, even out of 3 generations, I could not get Iron Man in the photo. It could only generate Will Smith and Queen Elizabeth for some reason. And both of them do not look like the actual person. So definitely not as realistic looking as HiDream. And then for SD 3.5, this is actually not bad. They kind of look more like Will Smith and Queen Elizabeth, but again, even for 3 generations, it just could not generate Iron Man. And then SDXL actually looks pretty good. This is the best render of Will Smith, but there seems to be like 3 clones of Queen Elizabeth. Plus, again, Iron Man is missing. So I don't know what's going on here, but if you look at all 4 generations, again, if I were to pick a winner based on the prompt, I would have to go with HiDream. In the next prompt, I wanted to see if it can generate hands and fingers realistically. So the prompt is 2 hands making a heart symbol. And you can see for both HiDream and Flux Dev, they were able to pull it off. For SD 3.5 and SDXL, it's just total nightmare fuel. So in this instance, I would have to give the point to both HiDream and Flux Dev. One thing to note is that HiDream is completely uncensored. If you download the local version, you can generate pretty much anything right away. Trust me, that was the first thing I tried. Now obviously on YouTube, I can't show you any of this, so here's the best alternative. So the prompt is a beautiful young woman. She is smiling with her tongue sticking out. She is wearing a white bikini at the beach. A view from above. Perfect body. So here's HiDream's generation. She is smiling with her tongue sticking out, and everything else does look pretty good. And then here's the generation from Flux Dev. She's also smiling with her tongue sticking out, and everything else does look realistic and accurate. And then here is SD 3.5. She is smiling with her tongue sticking out. However, this top does not look accurate, plus, oh my god, what do we have here? And then for SDXL, the quality of this is actually surprisingly good. But notice she does not have her tongue sticking out. So in terms of actually following the prompts, I would have to give the points to HiDream and Flux Dev. Alright, next I wanted to see if it can generate anime. So the prompt is anime style, a girl in the city at night. So here is HiDream's generation. This looks pretty good to me. It does have some Flux vibes to it, in that the background is super blurry. And then here is Flux Dev's generation. Again, everything looks perfect, but the background is kind of a bit too blurry to be anime. And if you compare both photos, notice that the face kind of looks the same, the background kind of looks the same. So it's very similar. And then here is SD 3.5. The background does look a bit more anime. It's not as blurry, but all the text is messed up. And then surprisingly, here is SDXL. This is a beautiful generation. And if you compare all 4 generations, I would have to give the point to SDXL. This looks beautiful and the background looks more anime than the other generations. Thanks to Humva for sponsoring this video. No more spending hours on expensive video shoots. Humva is an AI-powered avatar platform that lets you create high-quality spokesperson videos in minutes. Easily create tutorials, testimonials, and social media content with any character and dialogue you want. No need for a camera, editing skills, or even a real person. Here's how it works. First, you can choose from hundreds of presenters to be the face of your content. They can range from realistic people to 3D cartoons like this. Or if you want to use yourself, just upload a single photo and create your own digital avatar. Next, you can choose from a huge selection of voices in multiple languages.
Let's make this awesome together.
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 Whatever you're aiming for, you're in the right place. Let's make it happen.
They also offer support for many different languages, so it's really easy to generate content to reach a global audience. This is perfect for businesses, influencers, and marketers looking to create content and boost engagement. Whether you need a sales pitch, product intro, an onboarding tutorial, or a social media post, Humva makes it ridiculously easy to create professional-looking videos at a low cost. To celebrate their official launch, Humva is offering an exclusive first-month free trial for new users. See full details in the description below. Alright, next I also wanted to test its ability to generate different art styles. So here the prompt is Monet-style impressionist painting of a deer in a forest. And for your reference, an impressionist painting by Monet looks like this. So the point of these paintings is you're supposed to take a few steps back and kind of blur your vision a bit to see the scene. Like the people here, the grass, the ships in the background, nothing is really defined in shape. These are just brush strokes, but if you add all of this together and you zoom out and you blur your vision, then you do see a nice picture. Now, here are the generations for all 4 models. Note that none of them could actually get this impressionist art style correct. So even for HiDream, the deer is way too defined. And then for Flux Dev, this is even worse. This just looks like a cartoon or something. And then for SD 3.5, this is actually not bad. We do see more of this brushstroke effect. However, again, the deer just kind of looks too defined here. And then for SDXL, this actually looks the best to me. It's not perfect, but if you compare it back to this reference image, then I would pick SDXL as the winner here. Alright, next I wanted to test its ability to generate uncommon animals, because most image generators out there, they can generate common animals like dogs and cats, but they completely failed to generate more uncommon species. So here the prompt is a pair of spectral tarsiers on a tree. And for your information, spectral tarsiers look like this. They're actually primates and they have massive eyes, and these guys live in Sulawesi. Some people call them the real-life Baby Yoda. Actually, let me also copy this reference image and paste it on the side here, but you can see that none of them could actually generate a realistic looking spectral tarsier. HiDream came close, but this looks more like a lemur than a tarsier. Flux Dev and SD 3.5 just got it completely wrong, and then surprisingly, SDXL is actually the best looking one here. This still looks horrible, but out of these 4 models, I would say SDXL is the winner here. Alright, so that sums up my test of HiDream compared to the other top open source image generators. I hope that gives you a good and comprehensive idea of what it can and cannot do. Overall, after testing all those tricky prompts, HiDream did score the most points. And after a few days of testing this, at least for me, I can confirm that this is the best open source model out there. Now, one thing to note is that I'm kind of doing a disservice by generating photos just from the base models. Because all of these are open source, people can then fine-tune better checkpoints and loras based on the base model. So, for example, for Flux, I would never use the Flux base model. I would use a more realistic or more detailed checkpoint. Same with SDXL. I would never use the base model. I would use a fine-tuned version like RealViz XL or Juggernaut to generate even more detailed and realistic images. So I'm sure in a really short amount of time, people are going to start creating fine-tuned checkpoints and loras with this HiDream base model, which are going to be even better than the generations I showed you today. And plus, because this is completely uncensored, you can bet that there's going to be a lot of checkpoints and loras for corn. Like literally any position or fetish you can think of, people are going to fine-tune something for that. Anyways, that sums up my test. Next, let's go over how and where you can actually use this. So here's their official GitHub repo, and note that they've launched 3 different models. The full model is of course the best quality, but this does take longer to generate one image, and they recommend that you set at least 50 inference steps to generate an image using this model. And then we also have Dev, which is a bit faster but lower quality, and then we have the fast model, which is the fastest but the lowest quality. But honestly, even the fast model is pretty good. This model does require an NVIDIA GPU. If you don't have that, you can run this online. So they have released a free Hugging Face space. Notice that this only uses the Dev model, which is slightly lower quality but faster. So the Hugging Face space is just over here, and it's pretty simple to use. So you would just enter your prompt here, select the aspect ratio, and then click Generate Image. However, because this is hosted on Hugging Face, this space is censored. For free, unlimited, and uncensored generations, you would have to download this locally. And that's what we're going to go over right now. Note that you do need to have a CUDA GPU. However, their official models do require an insane amount of VRAM to run. I think it's like over 60 gigabytes or something crazy like that. The good news is there are already quantized versions of this. One option is this fork, which I'll link to in the description below. This is a 4-bit quantized model, so there's some sacrifice in quality, but this allows you to run it with as low as 16 gigabytes of VRAM. Plus, it includes a nice interface for you to generate images, so you don't have to work with code. However, this method does lack some additional settings like the CFG scale or the number of steps. So another place to use HiDream with more customizability would be through this ComyfUI HiDream sampler. And if you scroll down here, it says the quantized version requires roughly 15 gigabytes of VRAM. So it's not great. I understand some of you might have even lower VRAM, but this is what we have right now. I'm sure in the near future there's going to be even more efficient versions of this, which you can run with lower VRAM. But anyways, in this video, I'm going to go over how to install this HiDream sampler for ComyfUI. So I'll link to this page in the description below as well. Over here, it contains all the instructions on how to set this up. Let's go over this step by step. And by the way, this assumes that you already have ComyfUI installed on your computer. If you don't, see this tutorial where I go over how to install and use ComyfUI step by step. It's actually really easy once you get the hang of it. So the first step is to get Flash attention from Hugging Face and install it over here. Now I'm using Windows, so this tutorial will mainly be for Windows users, and it's quite a pain in the ass to install Flash attention for Windows, so make sure you follow this step by step. First, we need to go to this Hugging Face page, which contains all the pre-built Flash attention wheels for Windows. If you click on this Files tab, this contains all the wheels for different builds of Torch and CUDA and Python. So how do you know which one to install? Assuming you have ComyfUI installed, here is our ComyfUI folder, and you should see this Python embedded folder. So let's double click on that. And then at the top here, let's type in CMD to open this up in command prompt. Now, in order to check what version of Python you have for ComyfUI, you just need to type in python.exe --version. So let's press enter. And here it says I'm using Python 3.11. All right, the next thing we need to check is what version of CUDA you have installed. Like I said a moment ago, this only works if you have a CUDA GPU. So anyways, in order to check your CUDA version, simply type in nvcc --version, and here you should see that I'm using CUDA 12.4. All right, the final thing that we need to check is what version of Torch you have installed. Now, to see if you even have Torch installed for ComyfUI, simply type in python.exe-m pip list and then press enter. And this would basically list out all the packages and dependencies you have existing for ComyfUI. So if you scroll down here, you should see that, at least for me, I have Torch installed, and this is for 2.5.1, and then the CUDA version is 12.4. If you don't see Torch installed, then you would need to type in python.exe, so this uses Python, and then pip to install Torch, Torch Vision, and Torch Audio. But I already have this installed, so I don't need to do this step. All right, so given all this information, going back to this Hugging Face page, let's select the appropriate Flash attention wheel to download. So I'm using Torch 2.5.1 and then CUDA 12.4. So let's find that. So here's Torch 2.5.1 and then CUDA 12.4. And then I'm using Python 11, so it's gonna be this one. So here you can see Python 3.11 and then CUDA 12.4, Torch 2.5.1. So let's download this one. I'm going to click on this button to download it, and you can download this wherever you want. I've just put this in my downloads folder. So afterwards, I'm going to right click here and then click on copy as path. All right, so next, going back to our command prompt within this Python embedded folder, to install Flash attention, we need to type in python.exe-s-m pip install, and this basically uses pip to install our downloaded wheel. And then I will just paste in the path of the wheel which we just copied. So let's press enter and then wait for this to complete. Perfect. So that was pretty quick. You can see here it says successfully installed Flash attention. All right, so now that we got the hard part done, the next step is to install Accelerate. So again, in this Python embedded folder, we simply need to run this code. So let me copy this, and then going back to our command prompt, make sure you are within this Python embedded folder, and then we would paste this code in here. I already have Accelerate installed, so this didn't install anything additional for me. All right, the next step is to install this node with Comfy Manager. So we can exit out of this command prompt window, and then in our ComyfUI folder, let's start up ComyfUI. So I'm going to double click on this, run NVIDIA GPU.bat, which will start up the interface. All right, so after you see your ComyfUI loaded up, let's click on Manager, and then click on Custom Nodes Manager. And let's search for HiDream over here. It looks like this new node isn't registered in their database yet, but that's okay. We can also install it via a Git URL. So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm just going to copy the URL of this GitHub and paste it over here. So let's click OK and wait for this to install. Perfect. So it says it has been installed. Please restart ComyfUI. So I'm going to close this and then close and then click restart. And notice when I restart ComyfUI again, it's now installing this HiDream sampler as well as other dependencies. So this is going to take a few minutes. All right, so after downloading and installing all the packages, at least for me, I got this additional error, no module named Triton. So it looks like we need to also install Triton. So in order to do that, let me exit out of this first. And then again in my ComyfUI folder in Python embedded, I'm going to click at the top here and then type in cmd to open up command prompt in Python embedded, and then I'm going to paste in this. So this is going to use Python and pip to install or upgrade Triton for Windows. Let's press enter and wait for this to install as well. And after this is done, then hopefully everything should work. All right, so here it says successfully installed Triton for Windows. So let's exit out of this. And then one final thing we need to do is that we need to add this in our run NVIDIA GPU.bat file. So let me go back to my ComyfUI folder, and then in this file, run NVIDIA GPU.bat, let me right click this and then click edit in Notepad. And then I'm going to copy this and then paste it in here. So I'm going to press Ctrl S to save it and then exit out of this. So now let me double click on this to start up ComyfUI again. And you can see when I start it up, it says use flash attention over here. Alright, so after you load up ComyfUI, the next step is to simply drag and drop the workflow of this onto your ComyfUI interface. So here is the basic workflow. Let's click on this and then click download, and you can download this wherever you want. I'm going to call it HiDream.json and then click save. And the nice thing about ComyfUI is this might look really complicated to you with all these nodes and noodles, but you don't actually need to set up anything yourself. You can just drag and drop an existing workflow onto here. So for example, I'm going to take this HiDream.json, which I just downloaded, and then simply drop it onto ComyfUI. And this is pretty much it. Here's how you would use HiDream in ComyfUI. Here's where you would select the model type. For my first test run, I'm just going to use this fast model. I'm going to leave the prompt the same. Resolution, I'm going to leave square. And then next we have seed. This is basically the starting point of the image. So if you set all the settings the same, and you keep the same seed, you're going to generate the exact same image as before. If you use a different seed number, it's still going to generate a photo of an astronaut riding a horse on the moon, but it's going to be slightly different from another image with a different seed. Usually I just set the seed to randomize. And then for number of steps, you kind of need to know how diffusion models work. So it starts off with an image of random noise, and at each step it takes away some of that noise until eventually you get your final image. So the number of steps is basically how many steps of denoising you want the model to take. The more steps you have, the more detailed your model will be, but at a certain point, you're going to get diminishing returns. So if you want to leave it at the default, you would just set the value to -1, but if you want to change it to like 20 steps, then you would set the value to 20 over here. I'm just going to leave this back to -1. And then CFG is basically how literally do you want the AI to follow your prompt. So if you set this to a really high value like 10, for example, it's going to follow your prompt really literally. Whereas if you set this to like 2, then it's going to be more creative and not follow your prompt so much. Again, for this, I'm just going to leave it at the default value. So I'm going to set this to -1. So let's click run and see if this works. Note that the first time you run this, it is going to have to download the model first. So if I open up my command prompt, it's now fetching and installing the HiDream models. Alright, so that took like 30 minutes to download all the checkpoints, but note that this is only the first time you run this workflow. Afterwards, it's going to be really quick. And as you can see here, even with the fastest and smallest model, it was able to generate a really beautiful photo of an astronaut riding a horse on the moon. Now note that this is just a preview image node, so in order to save it, you would have to right-click this and then click on Save Image. If you wanted to just auto-save every time, then you can also get rid of this node, and instead, let's double-click anywhere and then search for Save Image and select this node. And then we just need to connect the noodle to this node. So if we use Save Image instead of Preview Image, then the image would be saved every time in your ComyfUI output folder. And that's pretty much how you would set this up. Pretty easy to get started. So that sums up my review and tutorial on HiDream. At least from my few days of initial testing, this does seem to be the best open source image generator we have right now. And yes, this even beats Flux. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. If you've had a chance to play around with HiDream, what other impressive generations were you able to come up with? And as always, if you run into any issues or errors during the installation, welcome to paste the error message in the comments below and I'll try to help you troubleshoot as much as possible. As always, I will be on the lookout for the top AI news and tools to share with you. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Also, there's just so much happening in the world of AI every week. I can't possibly cover everything on my YouTube channel. So to really stay up to date with all that's going on in AI, be sure to subscribe to my free weekly newsletter. The link to that will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.